At this point, I've covered so many different Hellraiser stories spanning across so many different times, places, shapes, and puzzles, and I gotta say, it's getting a little hard to find ones that just kind of feel a little more unique than all the rest of them. Ones that are a little more than just finding a box sitting in some old dilapidated house. And while I've only touched down on 6 of the short story Hellraiser comics, I recently decided it was time that I dive in and I read every single one of them and find the stories that are worth my time. The ones that are worth me spending 10 hours editing these things out. And I gotta say, I think that I've finally done that. I found one that actually poses a little bit of a question of whether or not these awful cenobites are allowed to actually take an innocent soul. I feel like there's only been a few instances where this was actually allowed or maybe disallowed. And the biggest moment that I can think of is a long time ago when I did one of my very first Hellraiser videos on a very unsettling story about a woman who was utterly sick and tired of her life, wanted to become a cenobite or at least be taken away by them, and upon performing the ritual, one does show up, and upon him actually climbing inside of her body. And if you haven't seen that video, I very highly recommend you go watch it. It is extremely uncomfortable, but the ending is very beautiful, as what the cenobite finds inside of this woman is an actual fetus, a baby who he decides that can't even make the choice of whether or not it wants to go to hell, that it probably doesn't even know what the bowels of hell look like, let alone the world of the gash. And through this, the cenobite actually says we cannot take anybody that we want, that there is rules. And it was a story that I thought was very cool, actually showing that the world of the gash has a little bit of structure, does have a set amount of rules, and that basically they cannot take any innocent soul. You cannot go if you haven't earned your place. Well, recently on my attempt to actually go through the rest of all these short story books that I have, I found one where this seems to be contradicted very heavily, as we see a woman trying to give her young son a bunch of toys that she has found at a thrift shop. And when it's revealed, one of them is actually the lemarchand cube, something that we actually have not seen in a little bit since we've been covering these stories. And obviously, this spells trouble. And immediately, the mother knows that this is not any kind of normal toy. She tries to take it from her son, but suddenly he will not give it up until inevitably the gates of hell are opened and they are both taken away. And I gotta say, one of the best things about this story is not only does it give us a little bit of a question, a mystery, a contradiction, we actually get to see the world within the gash, inside of the labyrinth, something that I really haven't gotten to see in any of these stories yet. And the things that lie inside of it and the different cenobites that we are about to see are truly terrifying, as well as the artwork just being absolutely fantastic. These Hellraiser short stories always impress me with their art. It's one that I just found incredibly enjoyable. So today, we're gonna touch on this, and by the end of the video, I really want to know what you guys think. Tell me every single instance that you know in the Hellraiser franchise where an innocent soul has been sucked down forever eternal torment. And let us begin. Andy, kiddo, mommy's home. Look, Andy, I bought you something. Home, such as it is. Something else from the secondhand store. Someone else's cast-off junk. Something better than nothing. Give me the block, Andy. Dirty block. Bad toy, please. But a baby couldn't know the difference anyway, could he? And this is where our story will begin, is with a mother coming home and giving her son a brand new bag of toys from the local thrift store when suddenly the lemarchand cube drops out. And this isn't any kind of normal one. This one actually appears to be much older, and in a few pages we will actually see it change into a bunch of different shapes, something that I really haven't seen it do ever since the new Hellraiser movie that came out last year. And from here on out, the mother will be basically just trying to take this toy from her young son, when suddenly he decides that he is absolutely not going to give this up. It has become his new favorite obsession, and she actually says this herself, that she doesn't really understand what else this could be. That there's no possible way that a child this young, a child who cannot speak, cannot walk, could even harbor feelings of obsession just so quite yet. And by the end of it, she more or less just feels bad for even trying to take this away, for she wants to give her child some sense of joy in a world where she got to experience so little. Aren't you ever going to talk to me? Aren't you ever going to walk, Andy? It's time you ought to walk. For months, ever since she brought him the block in a sack of alphabet blocks from the flea market, she has watched him turning, twisting, and prying at the block, arresting his normal development. Laura, damn you! Always throwing her good money away on more secondhand junk for baby. Always the baby. I have to buy used toys, used clothes for Andy, but it's nothing but the best for you, right, Jack? And lots of it. And as Laura's husband walks in, a raging drunk and a person that resents her for all the time that she spends with his child, let alone all the money that she spends on him rather than his drinking habits, walks in with the drunken rage and right off the bat slaps her clear across the face. And with her next few thoughts, she doesn't really understand how they even got to this point, that when they first met, he used to caress her face so lovingly and so gentle, but ever since the baby, he has held nothing but resentment for her. And now she doesn't really understand how a man could be so mad at the woman who gives his child love, shelter, and joy. And this is where things start getting a little crazy. As the environment in the room grows harsher and harsher, little Andy realizes that something is wrong. He doesn't quite understand why they're fighting, but he can feel the anger in the room, and he can feel that Jack is hurting his mother, the lady that he loves, and he knows that Jack also wants to hurt him. And with the next couple of panels, Andy will continue to twist and turn the puzzle box that is at his fingertips. He understands the widespread promise of the puzzle box, that he can stop the angry voices, and he can make things change. If only he can work the puzzle. And this is exactly what little Andy does. Suddenly we see a burst stream of electricity coming out of this shape, and suddenly a gate to hell is open. And we see this fleeting blue light completely flood the room. And suddenly Andy says his very first words. See, mommy, everything is going to be different now. The promise of the puzzle box is coming true. And finally, with his first couple of words, we look to the side where the origin of this blue light spreads across, and suddenly we see two cenobites walking out. Two cenobites that I've never actually seen before, and two that seem to be very interesting, as they're actually from a very long time ago, mentioning that their puzzle box has not been opened in over 800 some years. They were identical sisters, both had crystal blue eyes, and both had musical voices. But that was long ago. As cenobite sisters in pain, they have their differences. The Elegi configuration, it hasn't been opened since the time of Shrivia in Sumatra 800 years ago. Who are you? Silence. Jack, let me go! We have come for the one who summoned us by the means of the configuration. We have no use for the infant, no place for the innocent. But the seal has been broken between earth and hell, and the schism cannot be closed again until we take what belongs to us. And so, we take what belongs to us. And as the cenobites say this is exactly what happens. They pick up baby Andy and they begin to walk back through the portal. But before any of this can happen, Jack has grabbed Laura and he merely tells her that they never needed the baby at all. That they never did. That all they need is them and each other. And you would think that this might be a little bit too late after he gets pissed drunk and immediately slaps his wife across the face, all for just giving her child a little bit of joy. And essentially, Laura has finally met her breaking point. She's never really struck back at Jack and his aggressive actions, and this is exactly what she does. Knowing that her son is being taken by these strange entities that have seemingly just completely burst through the wall, and she throws her elbow directly into his chest. Shut up and let me go! If we could choose it, it would be you that we took into hell, Jack Kendall. But we are bound by the law of Leviathan, and we do not choose. Laura used to imagine that she would be thrilled to hear the first words that Andy learned to say. Instead, it breaks her heart. And as Laura flees from Jack, she essentially runs through the portal, chasing down these cenobites that have taken her young son. And she actually makes it through, and this is where we'll be greeted to the awesome world of the land of the gash. And yes, I'm making it apparent to actually say that I'm very sick of hell. I'm very sick of saying hell when this is the world of the gash. A name that I will never forget, and one that always strikes me with some kind of feeling every single time I say it. But as she runs through this portal, it eventually closes and actually pinches off the back of her sweatshirt and completely cuts it. And what is behind her now is nothing but a cobblestone wall. She struggles out of the jacket, terrified and desperate to save her child. But the sisters don't answer her cries. They don't wait for her. They in no way acknowledge that Laura exists, leaving her all alone and lost in hell. And with this, Laura can hear her son screaming out for Mama. The first words that she has ever seen him speak are the words that are breaking her heart. And as she continues to make her way through this labyrinth, all these giant, deep, and dark, and blue-shaded walls, she continues to follow the Cenobite sisters, only about a mere 20 feet behind. And as she gets closer and closer, the fear grows inside of her stomach, inside of her heart, and inside of her mind. But as she realizes that Andy is the only thing that has ever brought her any kind of joy in her life, she essentially just weighs this off, knowing that she needs to do everything that she possibly can to get her child back. And this is exactly what she does. She sprints even faster, running up behind them and grabbing them by the back of the neck and trying to throw them down. And as she gets a clutch on little Andy's shoulder, essentially one of these cenobites lunges out with her giant talons and attempts to actually scratch this woman. And it would appear that she did actually clip her right on her cheek. But nonetheless, she finally has her child back, and she sits there, feeling the warm heartbeat of his living body. Clutching Andy, Laura Laura runs the only way she can, deeper and darker into the labyrinth. She escapes from the Cenobite sisters, thinking maybe she got lucky, as if there could be any such thing as luck in hell. Light! There's light ahead of us! Light, yes, the light of 1,000 glittering torches that line the wall of the descending stairs. But her eyes aren't used to it, and in this moment, she is nearly as blind as the Cenobite with no eyes. She falters, and her feet slide on the cold wet stone of the stairway. She gropes towards the wall for support, unable to see what she is touching, but the wall sees her. And this is kind of a part of the story that deeply reminds me of a little bit of The Labyrinth, when the young girl is kind of falling down this hole, and you see all these different hands just kind of like holding her and passing her down this wall as fast as they possibly can. This is essentially what this wall in this Hellraiser story is. It's a bunch of half-made bodies screaming out, writhing and turning in pain and pleasure. And eventually one does grab her. It actually trips her, and her and Andy go tumbling down these stairs. And as they continue their tumbling process, they finally make it to the ground, where Laura is looking at a cold and wet slab of stone, covered in little speckles of her own blood, and noticing that Andy's shoe has actually fallen off. She eventually picks this up and begins to kind of laugh at herself that he has dropped this. And she begins to think that if she can laugh in the face of whatever this world is, that maybe she's stronger than Jack ever thought. That maybe she's actually strong enough to get away with what she's doing, to actually leave this land with her child, and bring him back to the safety in a world where his father could never bother them again. And as she looks around at the options of where she can kind of proceed to go, she looks down a hallway, and we see none other than this giant cart being trotted along by this mysterious monster, and one that I've never even heard about in the Hellraiser franchise. This also kind of reminds me a little bit of The Labyrinth in the sake that it reminds me of the giant drill creature in the tunnels, once again, kind of chasing her down, only this time 10 times more terrifying, as we actually begin to get a shot of what's inside of this cart, and it is none other than just a ton of dead bodies. Not the most pleasant sight, and surely something that you wouldn't want to see if you've never been to the world of the gash, which surely nobody in these stories ever has, alright? It's always the first time, and it never really seems like a good place to be, if you get my drift. The fiery eyes bear down on her, but she is learning that hell is a place full of surprises, although none that are pleasant. Its job is to stalk these passageways in search of living things that don't belong, in search of living things that bleed too freely, mothers, babies, and things like that. The stone gives way to wood, wooden stairs that sag and creep beneath her, threatening to break, to send her falling into the unfathomable darkness. She is afraid to move, and afraid to run, afraid to stop running. And as Laura is sitting on top of these stairs, knowing that this strange cart-driven creature is right behind her, she realizes that blood is on little Andy's shoe, and she thinks that maybe she can toss this off into another corridor, that surely this creature will leave them alone. It will be thrown askew, and surely be sent on its own maddening path. And as she does this, she looks back at Andy and tells him that she won't let anything ever hurt him again. And what she hears next as this creature passes by is the rending of Andy's shoe, by the wetness of its mouth and its terrible, terrible teeth, adding to its collection of whatever is in the back of its cart. And while this creature has found something so unexpected in its path, Laura finds something as well, as she looks beyond the corridor to these giant, ominous-looking wooden doors. And beneath them, she sees once again the Cenobite sisters. In her finally having enough, she eventually decides to run to them, figuring that maybe she can actually plead with these two creatures to let her and her son out, that surely they have not earned their place in hell yet. And what we will see next from these two is something so upsetting, cruel, and at the same time, the most mercy that I've really ever seen a Cenobite give. As she continues to run towards these creatures, she stops directly in front of them. "You've come here in vain, Lord Kendall, and the baby is ours. I won't leave without him." "Then stay in hell from this time on. Choose what you will. Stay, and we'll make a game of it. If you protect your baby well enough, make him strong enough, he might escape from this place. But you will never escape. You will think back to when freedom was yours for the taking, but your freedom is gone now, and hell is forever. Do you bind yourself to this agreement?" For Andy, yes. "Then welcome to grief, and to pain, and welcome to hell." And as we see these giant wooden doors creaking open, and another surge of blue light just pouring out from them, Laura and Andy begin their sodden walk inside. And while Laura has agreed to her new fate, deciding that maybe if she can give up herself, that maybe she can raise Andy to actually eventually leave this place, what comes next wouldn't really seem so, as when she walks through this door, we are greeted to her very same apartment building, and something maybe just a little bit confusing of whether or not they actually let her out. But to me, what I think this is an ever-looping personal hell. As she looks to the couch, and there is none other than Jack sitting there with his famous bottle of booze and a strange look in his eye that spells out rage. Welcome home, honey pie. I knew you'd come back to me. You always come back to me. I'm gonna make you so damn sorry. And Laura sets down Andy, her baby, her kiddo, to take his first step in hell, standing on his own. And this is the end of our story. As we see Laura possibly fighting back against her husband, like I said, I wasn't really sure whether they were actually allowed back into the real world, back to Jack where she would actually have to fight her way against him, as this man is incredibly infuriating. But what I really think this is a very personal hell made specifically for her by these two twin sister cenobites. And with the last scene of Andy just kind of looking down at the puzzle box, it makes me kind of wonder whether this child will grow up to be a guardian himself, if he will be the next passer downer of this terrible configuration. And overall, I just thought it was a very good story, actually getting to see the innards of the labyrinth, as well as these two new cenobites that I've never actually seen before, saying that they're all the way from the Samaritan times, having not been released in so long, and finally coming across this puzzle box that was merely sitting at some kind of thrift store, which I also have no idea how this thing would possibly even get there. It seems that in every one of these stories, it's always sitting in some kind of derelict house, it's sitting in some strange storage unit, or some creepy old man is just kind of holding onto it, ready to kind of trade it off for a pack of cigarettes and a little bit of 5% juice or something like that. And it just seems to be maybe one of the easier ways to kind of obtain this thing, even though it is one of the older configurations. Another thing that I found interesting was exactly how this thing moves when it opens. At first it changed into a sphere, and then it kind of turned into a little bit of a rectangle, and then it turned into a bit of a pyramid. And while a lot of these configurations do move, we've seen this in all the different movies, as well as the brand new one where it actually turns into like 12 different variations of the configuration before finally Leviathan is released. But it is a very more unique looking one. And honestly, it's something that I'd like to build that is a little bit overwhelming for me. I have 3D printed a couple Hellraiser cubes in the past, but I've never really made my own. So maybe sometime in the future, I can go ahead and try that out. I can't promise anything yet. It seems like every time I got those printers going, they eventually just kind of like break down for no reason. Alright, it's extremely annoying. As such a versatile machine, you can basically print that thing into the fucking dirt and eventually bring it back from the grave. They're a very interesting machine. But overall, everybody, I'd like to hear what you think of the story, whether you think that these cenobites actually took an innocent soul, or whether they actually just took the mother in order to raise this son in hell to possibly release him later, which would still mean that they took an innocent soul, but maybe they're just not gonna keep it. I'm not really sure what the logistics of this whole thing is, and I'd be very interested to hear what you all think. But anyways, everybody, thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's a little bit late. I've gotten a little bit busy with work, once again doing some overtime, but I'm just gonna record when I can, edit when I can, and I'm just gonna keep pumping out these videos. I've been kind of putting out a lot of newer stuff, book reviews, the cut videos, some Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, some other stuff in the works if I find the time to edit that outside of this. And I'm just having a lot of fun on this channel since I've been back, and I hope you've all been enjoying it. But anyways, everybody, I appreciate you all so much for your lovely comments and things like that, and I will see you on the next episode of From the Heart with more Hellraiser, and actually, probably gonna be a little bit. I'm probably going to pump out 1 or 2 maybe shorter videos of the sort just to kind of build me some time to finally hit my next Swamp Thing arc, something I'm so excited for, and something I'm absolutely dreading to edit because it's going to be such a long video. I remember the last one that I did that took me 3 weeks. It ended up being like 50 minutes, but it ended up being like one of my all-time favorite videos that I've done so far. And I cannot wait to show you guys what happens next in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. It is absolutely amazing. I cannot express enough the love that I have for Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. Go get this box set. This thing is amazing. It was about $60 on Amazon. Highly worth it. But anyways, I'm rambling, and I will see you all on the next one.